Hi everybody, it's really nice to see you and see some familiar faces that we had a chance to chat previously. And today I want to tell you about Flutter, why I think and I believe that Flutter is one of the best choices right now on the market to build your app, and show our experiences in using Flutter for over a year now. But at the beginning, let me just introduce myself. So I've been working with Flutter for over a year now. I also worked with Xamarin and .NET technologies, but programming is not my only hobby. I also have been managing PWSat2 project, which was satellite that was sent into space last year in December, and till now it's still operational and it's orbiting around here. And also I'm a co-organizer of Flutter Warsaw, and I'm helping organizing the Flutter Europe conference. So let us start our presentation with a question. So perhaps most of you have heard about Flutter, and in recent months more and more you can hear Flutter that is able to do it. Flutter here, Flutter there. More and more companies have some small research groups that want to check whether Flutter is a viable choice for building their next app. And some of you may think that just another hype topic like Bitcoin or something like this, and it will pass within next month and no one will remember Flutter in 2 years. But actually, I think and I guarantee that after today's talk, you will want to build your next app in Flutter. Because we, over the last 12 months, checked most of the things that can happen with Flutter, and we have a lot to say about it. So let's ask ourselves, if you were to build an Android and iOS app today, what technologies can you choose? What technology stack would you choose to build fully featured large Android and iOS applications? So more than 70% of companies will go the native way. Will go with separate Android and iOS app. They will use Kotlin or Java and Swift for iOS. They will have two separate teams. But there is also almost 1/3 of the apps that have at least some parts made with cross-platform technologies. And currently the largest one of them is React Native. It takes the vast majority of the market, but there are also like more web technology-oriented stacks like grupa, Ionic, Fonga. They are a bit old right now, but they're still on the market. There is also Xamarin for .NET developers, and since few months there is also Kotlin native, and there is also Flutter. But I will talk about Flutter in a minute. So there is a lot of technologies to choose from, but today I'm gonna just compare Flutter versus native technologies and Flutter versus React Native, because this is the largest opponent on this market. So let's think for a minute, how would the native way look like today? So you'd have to have two separate teams, one for Android, one for iOS. They could be the same people, but they would be separate teams. They would use separate CI/CD pipeline. They would use separate tools. iOS developers would need to have maybe MacBooks, iPhones, and paid Apple developer licenses. So it's a bit of a struggle, but many companies do it this way. But later, after a few months or maybe a few years, there is a problem. The separate teams and separate code base is very hard to implement new features across two apps. We found out that customers, clients want their apps to look identical and have the same features on the same time for both platforms. So usually, or very often, we have to wait for second platform either to implement the lacking features or just publish the app with different set of features. And the more complex the app is, the larger the difference between the apps can be. And if you want to have the identical feature parity between apps, I think there's nothing more to choose from than so is there a better way? And I think the Flutter is the way to go. So some of you, of course, know a lot about Flutter, but for those that are new to our meetup, and for those that are just passing by, I'd like to introduce you to the Flutter technology. So Flutter is a new UI framework and application framework from Google that allows us to build beautiful, natively compiled apps for Android and iOS at the same time. And it's when you develop in Flutter, you write in the Dart language, which is more or less advanced object-oriented language, similar to C#, Java, and in some ways to JavaScript. But why Flutter is so important? Why Flutter is so great? So today I'd like to showcase 3 major features that make Flutter really great choice. So the first one is something that we as developers really like about Flutter. So it's incredible development speed. Thanks to the hot reload feature of Flutter, you can develop your apps in a split second. You can see changes made to your code in a fraction of a second on a phone screen or a simulator on your computer. And this feature feels like magic. Of course, other technologies also have something like hot reload, but Flutter has something extra to it. Flutter has stateful hot reload. And this stateful hot reload allows us to retain state between the code changes. And I will showcase this in a minute, because this is really a fundamental difference between the other technologies like React Native. The second thing is that when building apps with Flutter, the apps look okay just out of the box. So let's say you have to do a proof of concept, a simple app with that you have only one day to do. And actually you don't care about how the app will look like. You just want the app to have some function, to do one job but do it good, do it well. So with Flutter, you have a library of material or Cupertino widgets that allow you to implement Google-like looking app without even thinking about styling, without even thinking about changing fonts and so on. Because the app that you will build will look like Google apps looked like 2 years ago. And that's rather good-looking app. And the third thing is that the Flutter apps are really performant in release mode. So Flutter team aims to have 60 frames per second, or even 90, or even 120 frames per second. You can imagine that next year, most of the flagship phones will have 90 Hz or maybe 120 Hz screens. That's almost obvious that the next flagships will have such features. And in 2 years' time, when you will build your app, you will have to think about the smoothness of your app on such device. And none of the other technologies claims that it's able to achieve such smoothness. Flutter, on the other hand, has its main goal to develop apps that are so smooth. Of course, you can shoot your in your foot and make apps that's sluggish in Flutter, but we found out that if you're careful enough, you can easily achieve really great performance of the Flutter app. And there is also one more thing, because Flutter is now available for Android and iOS, and it's stable enough that you can build a production-ready app. But on the other hand, there is also ongoing work on Flutter for web and Flutter for desktop. And maybe some of you have noticed that my presentation is made in Flutter. I have to compile it, and this is just a macOS app built in Flutter. And frankly speaking, it was much easier and much more convenient to build my presentation in Flutter than to open very slow Microsoft Office or Keynote on macOS and go through the slides and arrange them in some strange way that I really don't like. And making it in Flutter allowed me to remain in Visual Studio Code for the next couple of hours, and that's what I like very much. So such use cases are possible right now. There are some frameworks that you can use to build your Flutter presentation, and if you think about, for instance, Electron apps, maybe Slack or Microsoft Teams that are built in Electron, they consume vast amounts of RAM. And in Flutter, you have just an ordinary macOS app that weighs less than 100 megabytes and uses maybe 50 megabytes of RAM. And this is something really great, and I can show you something that I think shows how performant it is. Let me go to the first slide, the last slide, the first slide. And as you can see, it took less than a second to go through all my slides, which are made in Flutter. Okay, so let us deep dive for a minute on how the Flutter actually works, because I think it's really important. So Flutter has these two modes, just-in-time and ahead-of-time compilation. These are technical words, but they are really important at the moment. So the just-in-time compilation, this is what allows us to have this hot reload feature. When you save your file in your editor, the file is uploaded to the device. The difference in the file is uploaded to the device and recompiled just in time to reflect changes on the running app. And this happens within hundreds of milliseconds, or even sometimes faster for smaller apps. And from my experience, I can say that it works like 8 of 10 times for like 80-90%. So it's really like high reliability. Of course, sometimes you have to restart your app if you make too many changes, or if you have some crashes that the debugger cannot handle any longer. The cost of this, let's say, magic feature is that the app is much slower, and the app is also much larger. It can weigh 50 or 100 megabytes, because you have to pack all those debugging modules inside the app. So you can just compare it to this ape that is slowly going to its target. But there is also this AOT mode, ahead of time. This is the mode that is used during the release of your application. When you download your app from App Store, the basic Flutter app weighs only 3.5 megabytes or maybe 10 megabytes for iOS. This is really small size compared to maybe React Native or Xamarin apps that can weigh maybe 50 megabytes, just the basic app. Also, the performance is really high. So if you have a relatively new phone, you can easily get 60 frames per second. And also, this is just a native app, and you have access to the native code of your app. You can implement maybe some native features that are not available in Flutter easily. And the second part of why the Flutter is what the Flutter is actually doing is its ability to have the identical interface for both iOS and Android, and what is important, the identical interface across all the versions of the Android and iOS. For instance, you can have the same UI, user interface, on Android 4, which was released, I think, 7 years ago or 6 years ago, and iOS 8, which was also like almost 10 years ago. So you can have the identical app running across all these devices. You don't have to worry about the differences in abilities of the manufacturer, for instance. Of course, you have to worry about something else, about the screen size. Yes, this is really like you can have iPhone 5s and iPhone 10, which are completely different devices, and you have to run your app on both of them. And Flutter makes it really easy to implement the user interface on both of these phones. There are also these small differences between iOS and Android that you perhaps really well know. For instance, the scrolling physics on iOS is completely different than on Android. And these differences are also provided by Flutter. So you can easily have, for instance, the familiar scrolling on iOS app. Of course, you can also turn it off. Everything is like very customizable. And there is also there are also these two diagrams. So Flutter paints itself independently of the platform. So usually when you have typical Android or iOS app, you use something called OEM widgets, so system components. On Android or iOS you use text fields, buttons, scrolls, and so on. So it looks like iPhone button or it looks like Android text field because when you build your app, you use the system widgets. In Flutter, on the other hand, you completely bypass the system components. You paint, or Flutter paints, all the widgets on its own. It doesn't use scroll views from Android, it doesn't use UI views from iOS. It just paints itself like, for instance, games do. You can easily compare Flutter to a game engine like Unity that completely owns the screen and owns every pixel on the screen. And this is really important because you can also, on the one side, you can build really simple Flutter app, but on the other hand, you can also build a very customly designed app that looks like nothing else. And now I'd like to show you the hot reload feature. So let us deep dive a little bit deeper. So hot reload is this module that allows us to change code and see the changes immediately. So here we have a simple list. It has some elements. And let us scroll to the bottom. So here I have the file that's responsible for this list. So it's called staggered preview, and let us change some parameters. So maybe change color. So I press Command S, go back, and it's changed in a split second. Maybe let's change something more like layout of the list. And what's important, I'm still at the bottom of the list, so my state is still the same. Maybe let's change something else, like the direction of the list. And bang, the list is now horizontal. And you can see that at this point, I lost my state. So the list is actually now at the beginning. And sometimes you have to just cope with it that you can lose your state because the change is too large, too complex to save the state. And finally, let us change something that you can perhaps really wait for. So this is the pizza that you were looking for today. It's a little bit too small, maybe change the axis again. So it's really easy to, for instance, put something inside every container that you can see. So this was hot reload, and during your debugging sessions, you use it all the time. Sometimes you don't turn off your app for hours, and it works pretty well. Of course, as in every technology, something sometimes breaks. The second thing that I want to showcase is the UI abilities, UI design abilities of Flutter. So on the screen, you can see two simple apps. One made with the material widgets, and one made with Cupertino widgets. So you have material design and Cupertino widgets that are provided by Flutter. And there are hundreds and hundreds of widgets, and through last year, I learned every day some new widgets, some new ways to use them. And frankly speaking, I learn new widgets every day during my daily job. So there's really many widgets that are available in Flutter, and the most basic ones are like this card, or maybe this transition, or maybe this floating action button. As you can see, it's really, really nice because when you hover your mouse, the shadow changes. So as you can see, that they are really well made, detailed, and so on. And on the other hand, you have also the iOS-like widgets, and you can build, if you want, completely custom iOS app that looks like it was built with Swift or Objective-C. Everything works. You even have some alerts that look like iOS alerts. And what is also great about these widgets, because in Flutter almost everything is a widget. So for instance, the text is widget, container, padding, margin, scroll view, and so on. Everything is a widget. And thanks to that, you can compose many widgets to build some more complex widgets. So maybe some of you remember or know that traditionally in Android and iOS app, you would use something like constraint system, constraint layout. And as we learned, constraint system is great if you have, for instance, 9 elements on a screen and you want to constrain each of them, for instance, in a grid. But when you want to change, for instance, dynamically some elements, or when you have dozens of elements on a screen, the constraint system can be really complex to maintain. Flutter takes its lesson from web technologies, from web development. It uses similar layouting system as you can find in typical front-end development. So you have rows, columns, flex widgets, stacks, and so on. And thanks to that, you can build dynamic, responsive design. So your app can look like a responsive web page on iPad and like typical mobile app on small iPhone. So this really is very important when you consider Flutter, because it requires a little bit of studying and understanding when you come from, for instance, Android development. But after, let's say, a few weeks, you really don't want to go back to how traditional layouting systems look like. And the last thing that I want to stress out today is that the Flutter community is one of the greatest communities I have ever seen. And when you meet these people, when you ask questions, for instance, on Stack Overflow, there are many great people that want to help you. The blogging community is very active. There are blog posts every week about some new features in Flutter, about some tutorials. And you can spend all day reading new Flutter content, new Flutter videos, and so on. And when you take a look at the, for instance, Stack Overflow charts or GitHub stats, you can see that Flutter's popularity has skyrocketed like nothing else. I think this month, Flutter reached the level of popularity of React Native on Stack Overflow, and I think it's on its way to surpass many of the most popular libraries and repositories on GitHub. The next thing is that there are many packages and plugins available for Flutter. Of course, as in every young community, some packages get abandoned and so on. But what's great about Flutter is that everything is open source. Flutter is open source, the packages are open source, so you can just go to the repository, fork it, and change whatever you need. And that's what we often do. At Linkcode, we often fork some repositories. Sometimes we contribute to them, and sometimes even if we contribute, we know that, for instance, the author is gone and doesn't want to maintain the library anymore. And the last thing is this share what you learned vibe. If you go to the Slack channel of Flutter community, if you go to the Twitter and look through the Flutter posts, there is vast number of Flutter posts that shared that since 1974 said Flutter's code reloading system most of the time works seamlessly, and he works in React Native also. React Native's hot module replacement server often crashes and requires restart, and this is really like large difference between technologies. Another of my colleagues said pixel perfect design is much easier in Flutter, but at the same time access to native views is very hard. So this is this really difficult problem to solve. Would you like to go with the native way or the completely abandon it and use Flutter? And Flutter allows, for instance, to make pixel-perfect design. Subsequent releases of React Native usually break your app. Migrating to newer versions of Flutter is trouble-free. And if you ever used React Native or Xamarin, you know that it's really, you really hesitate before you press update. You in Flutter, usually it's trouble-free, and I can confirm this. And now something that I think some of you waited for a long time today. I'd like to share with you some data, some lessons learned from our experience with Flutter at Lingo. So, over last year, we built 6 Flutter apps. 5 of them were designed for iOS and Android. One of them was only for Android. And we also built many proof of concepts, demo apps, and so on. And this shows that with, I think, 3 or 4 Flutter developers, you can achieve a really great number of fully fledged and complex apps. These were not simple apps. They had maybe, let me say about I will tell about one app in a later slide. So most of them lived up to the expectations we had. So they took more or less the expected amount of time. They took more or less expected amount of financial budget, which is really important. And if you ever conducted a mobile project, you know that usually the expectations are rarely met. For instance, we've rewritten one of our complex apps that we previously had developed for over a year. It was built in Xamarin, and we rewritten it in 3 months. At the same time, while rewriting this app, we developed another app, companion app, that was based on the first one. And in the same time, we added a really complex feature which was chat. So in 3 months, of course, the backend was almost ready. We knew the domain of the app. So the research was done. We had to implement make some design changes, but in 3 months, with 2 mobile developers, we were able to build 2 relatively complex apps in Flutter, and soon, I think this month, they will be released to the stores. And there is also one thing about the finance aspect. So one of our product owners once said, and he also wanted to build one app, and finally he built 2 apps because he had some time to spare. So I couldn't imagine building this app in any other technology with at least 40% of extra budget. So his expectations were to spend twice much money on the app. And I think this shows really well how Flutter helps to, for instance, spend money or to spend your time in much nicer environment. Okay. So my time is running out. So let me just show some things that I would like to talk today about, but I don't have time. So as you heard, Flutter gives us 60 or even 120 frames per second. There is ongoing work on Flutter Web, Flutter Desktop. The tooling is great. You saw that I didn't have any problems with hot reloading. There are many libraries like Flutter Block, Provider, Redux, and so on. Flutter is open source. It's cheaper. It's cheaper to develop apps in Flutter, and it just works. If you worked with any other technology like Cordova or Xamarin, you know that many things do not work. In Flutter, most of the things just work. So these are the things that I would like to leave you with, to remember that Flutter is fast. Flutter is fast not only in release mode, but you can also really quickly iterate on your design. And Flutter is cheap. It's much cheaper to build apps with Flutter. So I think these three things are the most important from today's meeting. And if you have any more questions, feel free to ask, to catch me during the break, or write to me on Twitter or by email. Feel free to chat with us, with all of us in Flutter Warsaw t-shirts. We really want to share our experience about Flutter. Thank you very much. Have a nice evening.